Guess who's back? Back again. Common sense is back. Tell a friend. Good night, Guyana. Good night to the entire Caribbean. Good night to everyone, wherever part of the world you're watching. This is Common Sense, and I'm so honored and happy to be back in the studio once again. The last time we recorded a Common Sense episode, I think it was about 2 years ago when Venezuela was threatening Guyana, and I think we had a discussion with the attorneys at law, Chevy Devonish and Rayon Miller. And so it feels great to be back in the studio once again, producing content. And I hope that all of the episodes that we produce this season will be of some benefit to you, your family, your businesses, and into your entire lives. A lot has changed in the world since 2023. A lot has changed in my personal life since 2023. And so Common Sense as well is going to take a slight shift. We're not just going to be focusing on financial literacy and business and entrepreneurship. Of course, we have the Economy Business Conference that encapsulates all of those themes. And so with Common Sense, I want to be able to speak on a plethora of issues and just not restrict myself to financial literacy. And so I may touch on some politics, I may touch on some sports, I may touch on some cultural issues, I may touch on whatever it is that is bothering me that I feel like I want to speak on. We're going to tackle in this episode of Common Sense. So I want to encourage you guys to tap back in. Of course, Common Sense will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and will be streamed live on the Shutter Studio Facebook page. And I'm so grateful to be in the studio, Shutter Studio, tonight, filming this first episode. So I've been raring to go again on the podcast scene. Right at Shutter Studio itself, there are multiple podcasts that are being produced. And overall in the country right now, you're seeing lots more content creation and long-form content in the form of podcasts, interviews, and videos. And I'm honestly grateful that the landscape has changed significantly from 2021 to 2023, when I was in the full flow of Common Sense to now. And so I'm glad that we have so many voices speaking, and I hope that Common Sense, can add to the conversations and bring something different, something new. So what are we going to be speaking about in this first episode? Just allow me to take a glass of wine. All right, so I want to tackle a theme that people don't really speak about a lot, but it's an emotion that most people feel. Without fear of successful contradiction, I would say that it's an emotion that everyone feels. And that is called envy, jealousy, and manipulation. And disclaimer, this episode has nothing to do with anything relating to me, but it's just something that I've been observing in our society, in business, in friendships, in the corporate world, where it's very, very prevalent, and even in our personal lives, in relationships, families. And so I feel like it's about time that we speak on these taboo conversations. When Common Sense first started, speaking about money in family, money in friends, money in relationships were some of the themes that we delve into. And those conversations were very taboo back then. And now, they're very common and there are multiple debates on social media every day about going 50-50 or who splits the bill when they go out to Tribe or Sheriff Bar, wherever it is. These conversations are very prevalent now in our society. And so we want to tackle the theme of envy tonight, right? What is envy? Let's start off there. Envy is the pain that we feel when someone else has what we want or becomes who we wish we were. And there are three main characteristics or qualities that must be present for the emotion envy to be realized. And this is coming from decades of research from sociologists and persons who have studied the field of human emotion, psychologists, and so forth. And so all of the research have pointed to three particular characteristics and qualities that must be present for envy. Quality number one, similarity. The person has to be like you. And so let's delve into similarity from a few different angles. We're going to start with class similarity. We come from the same soil. You know, when someone from your same social background, same school, same block, same upbringing makes it big, you know, it can be very hard for the persons that were left behind to be happy and to be joyful about the success of that person from the same social class as you that made it big. And so sometimes we feel something within our chest, in our bodies, you know, that communicates that we were feeling a way about this person's rise, this person's climb on the social ladder. And so we call that class similarity, right? You start thinking, you know what? We grew together, and now this person is in the state house. You know, we grew up together. I'm still a taxi driver, and my friend that I grew up with is now president of Guyana. And so feelings of envy can begin to be stirred up within our hearts, right? If you look back, even in biblical times, the story of Joseph, when his father gave him the color coat, and the brothers became very, very jealous of Joseph. Joseph even started to tell them his dreams, and that made them more hateful and envious and jealous of Joseph. And so we can see from the beginning of time that once you're in that same soil, from that same social background, within that same community, you can start to have feelings of envy, geographic similarity, if you're from the same place, right? You know, there's a special kind of envy that comes from proximity, you know, from seeing someone succeed where you are currently stuck. You know, so think about your community. Think about your country. You know, many times people talk about how Guyanese are more appreciative of foreigners than we are of our locals. If you really dig deep, maybe envy is the reason why we find it hard to, you know, celebrate persons within our geographic similarity, you know, from the same city, the same town, right? Because maybe their elevation exposes some lack or some insecurity within your heart and within your mind. And so many times these feelings of envy can be explained by class similarity, geographic similarity, maybe age similarity. You know, you grew up with somebody that is your age, right? And at the age of 29, 30, they have a house, they have a car, they are happily married, and you are still finding your way, you know, moving from relationship to relationship. You maybe still be renting or still using public transportation. What sorts of feelings does that conjure up inside of your heart and in your soul? Are you really and truly happy for that person? Or, you know, is their success a trigger for insecurities that may be deep within your heart? Another one of the major forms of similarity that can breed envy is career or talent similarity. You know, we do the same thing. And this one is probably the most obvious and also the most dangerous. You know, Aristotle, I think it was, who said that Potter envy Potter, right? Think about, and I'm going to let's use Shutter Studio as an example. Somebody that is selling cars, BM Auto Sales, and probably seeing the success of Shutter Studio won't feel envious because they're in completely different industries and sectors. But another photographer or another studio may be looking at the success of Shutter Studio and feelings of envy or jealousy or whatever negative emotions their success may cause will arise. And so many times you find that artists envy artists. You look at the Drake and the Kendrick Lamar beef. You know, Kendrick Lamar wanted to bring down the top dog. And the two of them have been trading subliminals for years. You know, Kendrick even said it in his song. It's not about just beef. It's about hatred. It's about love and hate. Right? I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk. I hate the way that you dress. Right? And so there were feelings of envy and of jealousy because they are in the same industry, in the same career, the same talent sphere. Right? And so you would find an entrepreneur envying another entrepreneur within the same industry. Or think about Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. You know, every time Cardi B maybe wins an award or drops an album, some sorts of emotions are evoked within Nicki, right? And many times those can be traced back to envy, jealousy. And so I really want us to, look inward, analyze, evaluate yourself, and see whether you may be carrying some feelings of envy within. The closer someone is to you in background, ability, or circumstance, the more their success feels like a judgment on your own or your lack thereof. And so that is why the psychologists mentioned that the first quality of envy is similarity, right? Now, the second quality has to do with self-relevance. What do we mean in this context, right? Does that person's success bother you, right? Is it that you both had the same dream, had the same vision? Do they remind you of what you could have been if you made different choices, right? All of those things speak to self-relevance. If success touches something that is tied to your identity. So let me break this down. If you don't care about basketball, right, you won't feel envy about anybody in the basketball field. I'm pretty sure that Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't envy LeBron James or Steph Curry, but I can tell you that James Harden maybe envies Steph Curry, right? Mbappe maybe envies Lamine Yamal, right? Because they are in the same field and their success is tied to their identity. And so it's not about only what they did, but it's about what it says about you as an individual. And so, that level of self-relevance can affect and can create feelings of envy within somebody's heart. All right? So think about from the very beginning of time with Caesar and Cassius. All right? Cassius himself was a very strong man in the military, and he did not envy Caesar's wealth. He envied Caesar's status. right? Because Caesar had what Cassius wanted. Caesar had the influence, the status, the power, the validation. And so those things were tied to Cassius's identity, right? And so the rise of Caesar felt like a personal indictment against Cassius. And so many times, many of the feelings and many of the behaviors that we see exemplified by many people can be traced back to envy. Ever sat and thought about why Nicki Minaj doesn't envy Taylor Swift, but she envies Cardi B? Or why Kendrick Lamar doesn't envy Bryson Tiller, but he envies maybe a Drake or a J. Cole? Right? Because of that same self-relevance, self-worth, because their success to him can feel like an indictment. And so, envy always strives or strikes where your dreams live. All right? So the final quality that is necessary for envy to be prevalent is the illusion of unfairness, right? Now, this is a very interesting one because envy kind of twists people's perception. And so people begin to become very disillusioned and delusional when it comes to envy, right? You start to ask yourself, how they got there before me? How come he's recognized and I'm overlooked? And people start to see other blessings and the success of others as some perceived subjective injustice, right? And most times there's nothing unjust happening. Right? These people just worked, hustled, sacrificed for their success. But because you may have not achieved their level of success yet, your time has not come yet, maybe, you begin to feel insulted, offended, and that perceived injustice begins to take a hold of you and evokes feelings of envy. And so you might see somebody being successful, and you sit down and think, they must have had some link, or they got to be doing drugs, or he got for doing corruption or some fraud. Right? It can't be that the person worked hard. It can't be that the person sacrificed. It can't be that this person studied to show themselves approved. It must be some subjective injustice. And those are the three feelings or the three qualities that must be there for envy to be, arisen within somebody. And there's a difference between envy and resentment, right? Resentment refers to how you feel when there is an actual injustice done. So, for example, if somebody got promoted above you, not because of their qualifications or their ability or their productivity, but because of a Nepo link, you have a right to feel resentful, right? But where it crosses over into envy is when this person actually got promoted because they deserved it. And you feel away. And so you begin to conjure up subjective feelings of injustice, even though this person never did anything wrong, right? We go back to this story with Joseph. Joseph didn't do anything wrong to deserve the feelings of hatred. His father just gave him a quote that, exemplified favor. But brothers became overly jealous and, began to plot, scheme his downfall. All right, so those are the three main qualities that must be there for envy to be prevalent. Look around social media. Social media has made envy become magnified and glorified on a whole different level. Think about when an influencer in your community begins to, blow up, right? Start seeing comments like they're so overrated, or they paid for their followers, or it's just because of who they know, or just a bunch of negativity that is flowing out from the hearts of people because, out of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And so instead of sitting back and, being admiring what the person would have done and, thinking if they made it, I can make it too, people begin to be filled with envy. And so sometimes we really need to take some time to evaluate our emotions, evaluate our motives, evaluate our thought processes, and understand what are the reasons we're acting out and behaving. What are the reasons that this person's success makes me feel this way? What are the reasons that this person's promotion makes me feel this way? And then you'll find yourself maybe coming under the spell of envy. All right, so understand that timing is very important, right? Not because it's not your turn means it's your loss, right? Your turn is coming. Alkaline said, wait your turn, right? And many times, if you can't be happy for other people, you may never achieve success, right? If you can't celebrate somebody else's harvest, you're not ready for your own, right? And so I want to encourage people, evaluate your emotions, evaluate your motives, and see whether or why the success of others is proving to be a detriment to your growth and to your peace of mind. Now, envy isn't only reflected in being jealous or having negative emotions over people's material possessions. The worst form of envy actually comes when people envy the intangibles that people possess. So, for example, charisma, creativity, innovation, ingenuity. Those are assets that cannot be replicated. Right? You can't type in on ChatGPT, right, and get charisma or ingenuity or innovation or creativity. You can get maybe the blueprint, right? You can get the wording, you can get the strategy. But ChatGPT can't give you charisma. No matter how much you try to copy, right? People will notice that it's not authentic to you. And one thing about Guyanese people, they can spot a fake very easily, right? They say, something tell me, or my spirit just don't take this person. Why? Many times it's because they can spot that something is off. This person isn't being genuine. This person is not being authentic, right? You can't buy charisma at Masig mega stores, right? You can't buy ingenuity at Matai supermarket, right? You can't buy that at the University of Guyana, right? You may get an MBA, a doctorate, a bachelor's, 5, 10 bachelors, but you still can't replicate charisma, creativity, innovation, and ingenuity. In the sports world, they always talk about something called the it factor, where you would hear analysts and commentators just saying, this guy here has the it factor. It's not something that you can explain, but it's something that just says this person is just special. He has the qualities and the characteristics and the abilities to be a superstar, to be the franchise guy, right? And so you can't copy presence, you can't copy aura, right? You can critique the process, the strategy, the implementation, but you can't copy certain stuff. And so envy is loudest when it's effortless, right? You can understand marketing, but you can't understand why somebody keeps making something out of nothing. And that begins to really, really tug at the hearts of many people, right? Because no matter what you do, you just can't be charismatic like the next person, right? And so the confidence of many people irritates the comfort of a lot of others, right? So the envy of intangibles, sometimes when you walk in a room, you can command the room, and people just are jealous of the fact that you can do that. Or when you are in a space, your energy just lights up the room, right? People get jealous that you can do that, right? But you're just blessed with that as natural talent and natural ability, right? You can't help it that you were, charismatic and attractive and people like you, right? But, those qualities bring out negative emotions in others who lack them, all right? So all of those things point to some real emotions that we feel in the workplace, in businesses, and in our daily lives. All right? Now, of course, I'm from the business world, and so I try to put everything into, the lens of entrepreneurship and business. Right? And even in business, you would find a lot of people being very envious and jealous of the success of maybe a competitor, of another person in the industry, right? And so they don't want to collaborate, they just want to compete, right? They may clap for you on social media or heart or like, but in the group chat, they're talking your name because of that envy and that jealousy, all right? So let us all, take some time to do some soul searching and see whether we are really and truly happy for others as they succeed, or we harboring feelings of envy and jealousy. Now, I'm going to begin to wrap up tonight's session by taking you to a verse or a piece of scripture in the Bible. First Kings, I'm going to read it for us. I'm not preaching, right? But I believe that even if you're not religious, there are certain lessons in the Bible that can really and truly help you to prepare for life, prepare for business, prepare for the world of work. All right, so let me just pull up that scripture quick, and we're going to be talking a bit about Jezebel, Ahab, and a guy by the name of Naboth. All right, so we're going to touch a bit on manipulation, slander, envy, and all of these emotions now that are encapsulated in this story. So I'm going to read it verbatim. So we're going to church right now. All right. So 1 Kings 21. Now there was a man named Naboth from Jezreel who owned a vineyard in Jezreel beside the palace of King Ahab of Samaria. One day Ahab said to Naboth, "Since your vineyard is so convenient to my palace, I would like to buy it to use as a vegetable garden. I will give you a better vineyard in exchange, or if you prefer, I will pay for it." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance that was passed down by my ancestors." Now let's stop there. This is a man, the king. So let's put it in Guyanese context. Let's say the president of Guyana wants to get a piece of land next to State House, right? And let's say the land is owned by, I own the land. So President Ali calls me and says, hey, Matthew, I want to buy that land next to state. I was there because I want to open up a vegetable garden. And this land was passed down to me from my father. My father received it from his father, and his father received it from his father. And, it was a generational piece of real estate. And in Bible times, when you owned a piece of land, it was almost sacrilegious to sell it. Right? And that's why he replied, the Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance that was passed down by my ancestors. Now, there are lessons from just these 3 verses. Right? Because we live in an age where everything can be negotiated. Right? Think about how difficult it was to say no to the president. Right? I don't know of how many people in Guyana right now, if the president approaches them about any piece of business or real estate or whatever, would have the strength, the moral fortitude to say, President Ali, I respect you, but respectfully, I can't sell you my land because this is our family's inheritance. Right? And that is basically what Naboth told King Ahab. Right? But in our time now, everything is up for sale. Right? Your reputation, your integrity, your brand. Once you get offered a substantial amount of money, people are willing to sell almost anything in exchange for money. Right? And so sometimes not every opportunity for advancement should be taken. Right? I know many years ago I used to say, some bags come with baggage. Right? Let that sink in. So sometimes you may be offered a $10 million bag. When you collect that bag and you open it up, the amount of baggage that you will be left with will be very, very crazy. And so you may find your life becoming very miserable, very, issues after issues. You get sick, you get depressed, a bunch of stuff because that bag came with a lot of baggage. Right? So sometimes the devil doesn't come with horns, he comes with a contract. Right? Right? The offer itself wasn't immoral, it was a financial negotiation. Right? But you have to know that not everything is worth being sold. And so you must protect your inheritance even when an opportunity seemingly presents itself. All right? So, of course, King Ahab went home angry and sullen because of Naboth's answer. The king went to bed with his face to the wall and refused to eat. Threw a temper tantrum like a little child. Right? Here comes Jezebel, the wicked old witch. What's the matter? What's made you so upset that you're not eating? Ahab responds and says, I asked Naboth to sell me his vineyard or trade it, but he refused. Here manipulation here now. Are you the king of Israel or not? Get up and eat something. And don't worry about it. I'll get you Naboth's vineyard. So Jezebel wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent them to the elders and other leaders of the town where Naboth lived. In her letter, she commanded, call the citizens together for a time of fasting and give Naboth a place of honor. And then sit 2 scoundrels across from him who will accuse him of cursing God and the king, and take him out and stone him to death. Right? Drake said in the song Churchill Downs, lucky me, people who don't mess with me are linking up with people who don't mess with me to mess with me. The shit is getting ugly. Right? Here we have a situation whereby a woman manipulated a weak man and did all manners of fraudulent stuff to get her way. So she forged Ahab's signature firstly, committed forgery. She slandered his name, right? So take note, forgery, which is deceit, slander, gossip, which ultimately led to the man being murdered and killed. And so manipulation, right? She wanting to use every conceivable method to get this land for her husband, ended up in a man being murdered and killed, right? Just because of an unprincipled woman preying on a weak man, right? And so Jezebel forged letters and hired false witnesses, right? She created basically one of the very first cases of defamation and slander. And many times we find in our culture today, if you are envious of somebody, if you are jealous of somebody, the very next step in the realization and the display of that envy and jealousy is to begin to now start coming up with whisper campaigns, slander campaigns against this person, right? So you can't replicate the success of the person. You can't beat them. So what next? Recruit people to hate, to slander, to gossip, and to defame the person that you're unable to understand and grasp why they are successful. So what you might find in Guyana, one of the funny things that I always see on social media is that somebody may post up, let's say they post up me, right? And they say that I robbed them of 100,000. Suddenly you would find about 50 other people coming under the post and sharing some stories about how I robbed them too. And so it's like they were just waiting for one person to come out of the woodworks, and then it's an avalanche of criticism and an avalanche of slander and whatever it is. And so envy always begins to recruit people to plot the downfall of the person being envied, right? Crafting false narratives, right? And you know, Jezebel was very strategic, right? There is no limit to how strategic people can get when they want to see your downfall, right? They will pull every single stop, every single string that they can, right, to control the narrative surrounding your life and your business and your career and your job. All right, so envy always begins to be manifested in the recruitment of other people to slander and to gossip, right? Why do they have to slander and gossip? Because they have to get other people in on their misery. You know, there's a famous saying that misery loves company. All right, and so that is basically what Jezebel did to get the people in the town to slay Naboth. But in the end, right, there's something called divine and poetic justice. And envy and jealousy and manipulation always backfires. Right? And that's why the Bible says, vengeance is mine. Right? What ended up happening to Jezebel? God sent a message that she will die and dogs will eat her. And lo and behold, years after, She died a very brutal death. I think she fell out of a window, if I can recall correctly, and cracked her skull and her neck. And the dogs dismembered her body and her face. All right? Think about what happened to Cain. And he envied the sacrifice that God, honored the sacrifice of his brother. Right? Cain became a madman. Think about what happened to Joseph's brothers. Right? When they envied him, they eventually had to go and bow down and, for the lack of a better word, worship him. They didn't worship him, but the tables flipped because he became the prime minister of Egypt. And there was a famine. And so they had to now, go back to their brother who they sold to slavery to get their sustenance and their food. And so envy, jealousy, manipulation always self-destruct. And so I want to encourage people that are watching to shy away from embracing the feelings of envy, of manipulation, and of jealousy. Because every single unethical gain has an expiration date. Right? You may be seemingly getting away with your concocted plans to stymie your colleague from being promoted. Right? You may be seemingly getting away with your concocted plans to destroy one of your competitors unethically. Right? You may be seemingly getting away with one of your concocted plans to convince an entire nation that a principled guy is unprincipled. Right? You may be seemingly winning in the short term. But always remember that in the long term, anything done out of envy, jealousy, manipulation, and wishing on the downfall of others will always self-destruct and will always backfire. Right? Now, very quickly, as I wrap up, I want to touch on something very quickly that I've seen played out a lot in politics over the past few months and years in Guyana's politics. People do not know how to work in teams, primarily because of a heightened and inflated sense of ego. I love to use examples from sports, so I'm going to give you another sports example. There's a guy by the name of Manu Ginobili, 4-time NBA champion. I think he won multiple Sixth Man of the Year awards, an Olympic gold medalist, universally acclaimed as one of the best players ever. Manu Ginobili came off the bench for the San Antonio Spurs. He was asked by Greg Popovich to come off the bench. Mind you, for almost every other team in the NBA, he would have been a starter. All right? But his coach asked him to, come off the bench. We believe that you being the sixth man would be a better fit for the success of the collective, for the success of the team. And Manu humbly embraced that role, and the rest is history. He became, like I just mentioned, a 4-time champion, very integral in the success of the San Antonio Spurs, winning 4 times, very integral in Argentina, winning I think it was a gold medal they won in 2004. Right? You can correct me if I'm wrong. But he became an international superstar, accepting a role that many others may not want to accept because they believe they have the talent and the skill to be a starter, but sometimes that may not fit with the collective and with the team. And so I say all of that to say, sometimes you have to be a superstar in your role. Everybody can't be at the forefront. Everybody can't be the man in charge. Everybody can't be the CEO. Right? You look at Drake and Forte. Of course, for those who don't know, Forte is Drake's producer. Forte is the man that shaped Drake's sound. You know, when you think of an album like Take Care and you think of songs like Marvin's Room, Take a Shot for Me, right? The Real Her. Forte was the mastermind behind that entire Canadian production and music that became the soundtrack to most of our lives. But at no point in time did Forte ever try to take the spotlight from Drake. He allowed Drake to flourish, to be the man, right? That received all of the critical acclaim, right? That received billions amount of streams, the Grammys, and all of these stuff because he knew his role. He knew his role. He played it well, and he was a superstar in his role. And so my encouragement to you, whether you're in politics, you're in business, you're in the place of work, know your role, accept your role, and be a superstar in your role, right? It is not about visibility or it's not about placement. It's about impact. You can go to Parliament and have no impact, or you can be out of Parliament and be impactful. What is it that you value? The position, the status, the visibility, or making an impact and contributing to the success of the team and of the collective. All right, so these are some things for us to ponder as we navigate the world of business, as we navigate corporate Guyana and the corporate world in general, as we navigate interpersonal relationships and even romantic and familial relationships. Examine your heart, examine your motives, see whether there may be some envy, some jealousy, some manipulation, and an inflated sense of self-importance and ego, and see the necessary adjustments that you may have to make to ultimately become a better person, a better entrepreneur, a better colleague, a better friend, a better husband, boyfriend, politician, whatever it is that you do. All right, so I hope tonight that after listening to this podcast that you will be able to get some common sense and that it will ultimately improve your life. See you again very soon, very shortly, for the next installment of Common Sense. Thank you, good night, goodbye.